Fully Loaded Chew is tobacco-free, long cut in pouches that gives you the same pack, dip, spit, and buzz that you're used to without tobacco. Fully Loaded Chew comes in 9 flavors and is made with all food-grade ingredients and tobacco-free nicotine, the purest form of nicotine there is. To give us a try, head on over to fullyloadedchew.com for a $1 can of chew with free shipping when you enter the code OUTDOOR1. OUTDOOR and the number 1. Lastly, many outdoorsmen are trying to quit tobacco altogether, and Fully Loaded Chew may be that first step. For more information on our product line, visit fullyloadedchew.com. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Hunting Gear Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Johnson, and today we are talking all about game calls, specifically dual game calls. And once again, Larry McCoy is the guest that's going to talk about that. We have a really good conversation up front. As you know, most of you know, the world is just kind of in a big mixing bowl right now as far as material, shipping, manufacturing, like everything's behind, right? It's taking longer to get orders. Shipping is a nightmare. Material is backed up to in just about every industry, especially in the hunting industry. And so we're talking with Larry today, and he basically kind of just confirms that. And the factory, some of the factories that are under the Outdoor Group umbrella, right? Dual Game Calls is one of them. They are working 24 hours a day trying to get their orders filled and shipped, and it's been crazy. And I asked him, and this is a good thing as far as the hunting industry is concerned. I asked him what is we're coming off of huge years in the outdoor industry and in how companies have been making really good money. They've, in some instances, had record sales years. And if he feels that 2021 is going to be that as well, and you'll have to hear what he has to say about that. Pretty interesting. But on today's episode, we're talking about dual game calls, specifically whitetail, deer calls, elk calls, predator calls. And I don't use a lot of calls when I go hunting. Obviously elk calls and predator calls are two things. But when it comes to two different things, but when it comes to whitetails, I don't overcall anymore. I used to be that guy that ran a whole bunch of sequences. And Larry talks about the testing, the research, the material that goes into their calls, how he feels that their calls are some of the most realistic sounding calls on the market today, and he explains all of that in today's episode. We talk about predator calling, we talk about elk, we talk about whitetails, and just about. And he also has given calling tutorials throughout the in the past years, and he talks to us a little bit about some deer calling strategy in this as well, which is a nice change of pace for the Hunting Gear Podcast. But dual game calls is the topic today, and good company. I've never used their products before, so I don't really have anything to say personally about it, but Larry's a good guy, and he does a really good job explaining the company and the functionality, the engineering, the company or the products as well. So listen to all that. All right, commercial time real quick. We're going to talk about the Average Conservationist first. That is an apparel company. Go to theaverageconservationist.com. These guys are making some really cool logos. It's a lifestyle brand, right? They have awesome shirts, hats, hoodies. They have some other little gadgets as well that you can buy. But I'm telling you right now, I absolutely love their product line, right? The t-shirts, first and foremost, they're the kind of t-shirts that fit good around the arms and chest and hide your love handles really well, so they're not tied around the love handle area. So that's one thing I really like. But the logos are just kick-ass as well. I have the Compass hoodie, very comfortable. I have the general hat, the trucker style general hat. That's a badass hat. I have what's the other one that I have? The Euro Tee, another awesome product. Now, as far as coolness is concerned, obviously, but they're durable as well. Hats, t-shirts, hoodies. But here's the kicker with this company. 10%, not 2, not 1, 10% of all of their revenue, gross revenue at that, goes to a conservation organization or a conservation effort, whether it's local, state, or nationwide. They're giving back right off the top before they even pay their taxes. So that is something that a lot of companies should be doing right now, but for some reason choose not to, right? And these guys are leading by example. So that's when you're looking for a cool hunting t-shirt or a cool hunting hat, think of the average conservationist, because these guys are not only talking the talk, but they're walking the walk when it comes to conservation. Also, check out the Average Conservationist podcast on the Sportsman's Nation here. I got to take a sip of water for this next one. All right, so I think that you guys, if you haven't listened to the Hunt Stand episode yet, you need to go listen to the Hunt Stand episode on the Hunting Gear podcast. I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago is when we launched it. But here's what I'm going to say. Go to huntstand.com, check out all the functionality that you can use with this hunting app. Now, if you're like me, you're like, oh man, before I started using Hunt Stand, I've been using some other platform that does something similar. Hunt Stand's cheaper. Hunt Stand has more functionality, but I have all years of data saved on my other platforms that I've been using. Well, I just found this out recently, that now you have the ability to import pins from other, let's say Onyx. Let's say you have 2, 5, 10 years worth of pins on Onyx. You can literally upload those or import those from that platform to the Hunt Stand platform, and now you only need one platform to do that in. And that's pretty badass, right? So now you don't have to run double of anything. You can just pick what you want on Hunt Stand, and they have they have a ton of different maps to choose from. The functionality is absolutely amazing. So check out huntstand.com, and I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to talk about Hunt Stand here. I've been playing with it around with it a lot lately, and it's pretty badass, man. So again, I'm not going to sit here and list every function, except that's what commercials are supposed to do. But here, I'll say, go to huntstand.com, check it out. Lastly, Lone Wolf huntingproducts.com, and the Lone Wolf sticks, climbers, hang-on stands, and I'm trying to think back to all of the deer that I've killed in the last, real quick, I'm trying to think of all the deer that I've killed in the hand. Last year's a different story because I shot it from the ground while I'm walking to my stand, to the place where I was going to hang my stand, because the 4 sticks and assault were on my back. Now, every deer that I've shot the last 5 years has been in this combination, 4 sticks and an assault. I love the mobility of it, the ease of use, the ease of setting up, tearing down. It's quiet, and here's the kicker: people just don't get it. You can set this tree stand up and level it in crooked trees. You can't do that with several other products on the market. You have to have a straight tree. So now what you're doing, instead of looking for the right place to hunt, you're looking for a straight tree. And if you're on a hillside, that could be a tough thing to find. If you're in some kind of swamp where there's real short trees and all the branches are coming up and there's not a lot, scrub brush basically, that's going to be hard. So Lone Wolf has the ability to level and set up in crooked trees, and that is a win, not only from the comfortability standpoint, but just putting yourself in the absolute best position to kill a target animal. And that is why 13 years ago I started using, there's maybe even more than that now, but several years ago, using Lone Wolfs, and here I am today using the exact same thing because they work, right? If there was something better by now, I'd be using it, but there's not. So lonewolfhuntingproducts.com, and if you do decide to purchase, enter the discount code, and what's the discount code here? 9FC21, 9FC21, and that's going to save you $50 off of all purchases over $200. So that's a no-brainer. Take advantage of that, and especially now that the season started. Okay, commercials are done. Now let's get into today's game call episode, I guess we'll call it, with Dual Game Calls and Larry McCoy. All right, on the phone with me once again from Dual Game Calls, Larry McCoy. Larry, what's up, man?
Hey, how you doing?
Doing good, man. I don't know about you, but I have my first hunt coming up in about 4 weeks, and I'm excited, but I'm not ready all at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. We're going to be kicking it off here, really soon for the show, 1st of September, I think, in Nebraska. So we'll have a pretty busy fall, and yeah, it's been absolutely crazy. So it's when you're this busy, it sneaks up on you faster than it usually does. Yeah, because I feel like I'm prepared and everything, but super excited for it.
Yeah, we had to cancel a couple. A podcast in the last couple of weeks that we had scheduled to record, but it's because it's of a good thing, right? You guys over at the Outdoor Group, with all your brands that you guys manage and run, have been extremely busy. And I want to get your opinion on this. We saw that through the COVID, the 2020, a lot of brands within the hunting industry saw record high sales, if not record sales, throughout that year because everything shut down. Everybody kind of rekindled the outdoors and the hunting type lifestyle and got back into it. Do you see that continuing on this 2021 hunting season?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. It's been it's good to see people getting back outside and kind of getting back to their roots, and even new hunters coming about. We're receiving tons of questions from new hunters. There's really a new market of hunters out there now as well, and they're starving for information. So, we appreciate people like yourself that's willing to spread that. But I agree with you. I think that this season is going to be super busy, from the manufacturing side all the way from game calls to bows to really every piece of that business that involves hunting or outdoor recreation. They've been swamped, and I think it's going to continue to be that way. The biggest challenge has been, getting product to out the door, quick enough, because majority of the businesses are up, and that's been a challenge. And like you said, we've had to unfortunately cancel a few of our recordings here, of late, and it wasn't by intention.
Oh yeah.
Crazy things, just super, super busy, and with trying to get stuff out the door, making sure we're, the retailers and the customers and customer, have product in hand.
Right. So for someone like me who's not necessarily connected, I'm connected a little bit more than the average guy. The average guy is like, hey man, I can't get my product that I ordered. What's the deal here? So from a manufacturing standpoint, I've heard a whole bunch of different scenarios: lack of labor force, lack of materials, shipping issues, and importing issues as well. What is causing to this? And it's not only in the hunting industry. I mean, I even noticed it with SD cards for trail cameras have been on the short as of lately. And so my question to you is, within the Outdoor Group, where are you guys seeing your biggest hurdles as far as getting orders out the door to customers?
Simply, it's capacity and getting material. With a lot of the issues going on in the world today, it's becoming more and more difficult to get some of those material. Number one, to try to keep the price to where it's affordable and not make a mid-year price hike just because material costs went up. So you have to be smart in the way you order materials and making sure you get them. And then for us, it's machine time, allocating those times that make those parts to do it. When you have a huge influx like we have this year, your forecast kind of goes to crap.
Yeah.
And it's, you know what I mean? So really allocating the time, the outdoor group, the employees there, they've been outstanding. We've been running 24 hours a day for quite some time, just trying to stay ahead of things, constantly setting up new machines, trying to keep things in motion. But the biggest struggle for us really is just, getting the materials in and then allocating the machine time. But you're right. Some of the other people too that we work with, talking with other manufacturers, import costs, for containers, and everything, all of that has changed via this year. So therefore it's created a lot of difficulties, number one, on just them receiving their product without having to jack up their prices, because those prices of their product getting here has went up.
Yeah.
Which was unforecasted from anybody. Nobody would have ever guessed that it would jacked up as high as it did. But so yeah, it's literally in every every category, not just the hunting, but fishing, also anything outdoor recreational, just anything, lumber, everything. Yeah. It's been it's definitely had a price hike into it, and there's challenges with every one of them.
Yeah. And I'll tell you this, I feel kind of like a dirtbag dad at the moment. I promised my oldest boy and my daughter that I was going to build a loft for them in their bedrooms, right? Something off the ground, probably about 4 feet. And then they could have this little play area underneath of it. Well, they keep reminding me, Dad, you said you promised you were going to do this for us. And I said, I know, but I didn't know that lumber prices were going to be so ridiculously expensive, like pre-COVID when I made the promise to now. Like, yeah. So that project went from about $100 to about $350. And I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
So I gotta choose my words carefully on how I say, well, you're not going to, I will get it to you, but it's not going to be right now.
Yeah, exactly. Because I had a little project I was going to do. I was going to build like a pegboard and like a new little archery bench for when I work on bows and stuff, And I went to Home Depot, and those carts they push around in there. I thought they were going to have to put me on one of those and wheel me back out to my truck before when I got in there and looked at how much that was going to cost. So I was like, Nope, that can wait.
That can wait. I'll use my tailgate.
Right, exactly. But you ain't kidding, boy. It's definitely a challenge. I'm hoping to see it start to, go the other direction and get back to somewhat normal.
Yeah.
Here soon.
All right. Let's get into dual game calls, because game calls in general kind of fascinate me as far as how they work. Like, I'll just give you a short example, a short story. I had a grunt tube, and I tell this story all the time in the Nine Finger Chronicles podcast, that I had for like 12 years, maybe even longer than that. And I had it, and it was the most realistic sounding grunt tube that I ever used. And I'm talking to the point where I would pull that, how sometimes when a buck's coming by, he's going to be out of range, but you want to either get a closer look at him, or you want him to come in and you hit him with that one, just the one. Mm-hmm. They stop, They get impatient, they turn around, they come walking towards you. I did that with so many deer on that grunt call, and then one day I lost it. And I have no idea where it went, even after all these years. And I still, to this day, have not found a game call that like resembles that grunt. And I don't even know what brand it was. It was probably some random call that I bought at Walmart all those years ago, but it just worked. So my question to you is, what makes, and this is kind of a high level random question, but what makes a game call? And I know Dual has like whitetail calls, they have elk calls, I believe, and then they also have predator calls. So what makes a good game call?
There's a lot of things that go into that. a lot of people can construct a call and make it blow, make the call produce sounds, and to where you as a user have to manipulate those sounds to make it try to mimic the animal that you're trying to sound like. A good call is you have to know the animal that you're trying to hunt. So a deer, they're very vocal animals. We just don't hear it a lot, but they vocalize quite often. So being able to have a call that can produce kind of that nasally sound of whether it be elk, deer, predator, because there is a uniqueness to it. And they're kind of like humans. My voice sounds different than your voice. That's how they kind of identify the same way. It all sounds somewhat similar to us, but to a deer, it doesn't.
Right.
So being able to mimic those sounds, it can be challenging. But you have to. There are certain techniques and stuff. Say with a grunt call, with a doe bleat, even all the way to elk and predator as well. That you have to have know how you need to push air through the call. You have to know the call as well.
Yeah.
Because you can overblow into a call in a lot of cases too, and it sounds like a grunt call will sound like a wounded duck.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of learn how to manipulate the call itself. But being ease of use is probably the most important when it comes to that, because once you got to trust that the call company has its technology and design down to mimic the call to the best of its ability. Yeah. And I will promise you that Dual is one of those, because we get a lot of messages about saying this is the most realistic call and there's a lot of reasons for that. Dual, it stands for dual chamber, and every animal that has vocalization has two chambers of air. You have your throat and your nasal. So when the throat is going to come out your mouth, and it also comes out your nose. So you have air coming out both holes. If you plug one, I'm going to plug my nose right now and talk, and you could tell that my voice changed, right?
Right.
So when that air goes through and splits up into both chambers and then rejoins as it's exiting, that's how you're producing both of those sounds. Dual mimics that exact thing. That's why there's two chambers. Whenever it blows, you're blowing through one hole or over the reed. The air is passing over the reed, then the air splits and rejoins as it exits the call, just like it would, on an animal. They say it's the most anatomically, I know that's a big word, and but correct call that's available today.
Okay, so you say technology, you say research, that kind of stuff. How do you at Dual Game Calls listen to something made in nature and then try to get that exact noise in a game call, right? I mean, because I've heard, especially with whitetails have crazy vocalization, right? It could be a real deep, like a buck roar or a deep grunt. Mm-hmm. It could also be and they can control it loud, they can control it soft, they can have different ranges, high and low in how they are grunting or vocalizing. Same with does. So how do you guys match that?
Well, we're fortunate enough, like for us, respecting MTV and stuff, like we document a lot of that, any of those encounters that we have. So we'll go back and rewatch those over and over, break it all the way down just into the sound files, and also try to mimic those sound files basis how the tone board of the call is produced, what thickness of reed, because it's not only about the call itself, but it's about the caller. Because I may blow a call a little different than you blow a call, so you have to come to a happy medium. I know there's a lot of grunt calls out there that whenever you pull it apart, you could see say a O-ring where you can slide up and down the reed for different pitches. And usually they have like a doe bleed or fawn bleed or mature buck, young buck. Well, that's there as just a base. It's just a base, something to reference, because everybody blows different.
Right.
And I tell this to people through some of the calling seminars I've done. You need to find your sweet spot on how you're pushing air through the call. So you may sound like a mature buck, but you also cup the end of the tube or whatever a little bit more to get a more deeper sound. So you may actually need that O-ring on the young buck setting, and it's going to sound deep and actually sound more realistic at that setting as a mature buck, because that's the way that you blow the call. So you've got to spend some time to get familiar with the call that you have, so you can get, increase the opportunity of being successful in the field.
Right. Okay. Now, I've seen, calls made from rubber, plastic, even some metal, a variety of different materials. Is there a material that is more conducive to a realistic sounding animal?
I think there are different materials that do, depending on the style of call that you're using. For instance, I'll use the stretch back grunt call from Dual. It has a rubber tube that you can literally extend out without making any noise, but it'll change the tone of the call on the fly. So as you're pushing air through it, you can go make those type of sounds, and not have like those in the old, back in the day when you had those plastic accordions. Whenever you extend it, this one's just rubber, and you can change that tone like that. So that helps you as to be more realistic. They're based upon how you're moving it. So it has a rubber end and the plastic molded barrel, but they're built to last, the fit. There's a lot of things that also go into, from our standpoint as a manufacturer. And, you have hot air and you have cold air. Obviously with hot air, things that expand; with cold air, things contract. So you've got to meet that happy medium to where you're not going to get a lot of that, expansion to where it's so tight and seizes the call up. And, you want that reed to flow and not stick whenever you're pushing a lot of air, or gets wet too. So material-wise, it's really based upon the design that's used. In the waterfowl world, obviously acrylic is the key, and you could probably move that over to about any other game call, just because it is very crisp, I guess, on the sound. So when you're pushing air through it, the sound is ringing off a little bit more crisp than it is in just a molded plastic call.
Yeah. And you brought up something there I want you to expand on, and that's temperature. Because in the past, I've had calls that would work great up into a certain cold temperature, and typically it was like before after freezing. So like when it would get below 32 degrees, I would have to blow harder, or I would either have to like blow in it to warm it up, or I even had times where I would tuck it in my shirt and put it under my armpit, which sounds weird, but in order for it to be warm to work. Is there, especially with Dual, is there any type of temperature that makes it perform any worse or better than another?
Well, we've spent a lot of time on that very thing, knowing what works and what doesn't, for especially with deer calls and predator calls, because ultimately that's when you're using those calls through a lot of different temperature spans. Deer season goes a long time, and I'm one of those guys. I'll call deer all year long, from the first of the season to the end of the season. So just for scenarios, just like you mentioned earlier about that one deer that you could just see his legs walking, and you've been getting trail cam pictures of a dandy buck in that area, and there's nothing worse than just watching those legs walk off and be like, man, was that him or not? One little call can basically predict your next, what you need to do next. He could give up their location as far as saying, okay, that is a buck, or if that's an animal that you want to pursue and trying to harvest, then it kind of gives you the opportunity to make the next move.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I think that as far as hot and cold, we have that perfected all the way down across our line. We test them through extreme temperatures, both hot and cold, and they will perform the same.
Gotcha. So temperature fluctuation in temperature really isn't an issue.
Yeah, nope, not with our calls. It's not.
Okay. All right. So we've talked about you have a couple of grunt tubes. You have a couple. Let me pull up the elk. You have. Looks like you got a diaphragm, and you got a bugle tube, and then you got an elk call as well. Let's talk about learning curve for a second. And I know that it's probably, from my experience, it takes more of a learning curve to learn how to mimic an elk and do the diaphragm, aside from like the whitetail grunt tube. It doesn't have to sound perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to use, but an elk calling is a little bit more complicated. What is a learning curve like to properly? I know you've been on elk hunts. You know how to do elk calls. What's a learning curve on a diaphragm and a bugle tube and the products that you offer?
The thing, what I like to say is knowing your skill set. A lot of people that I talk to that are just getting into elk are trying to utilize a call and they're skipping 2 or 3 steps, to try to get to an advanced level, when really this intermediate level is going to be just as beneficial to you in the field as the advanced level will be. And that's learning how to use it. Like you said, a diaphragm is going to be a little different. A lot of the diaphragm elk calls out there are used because you can mimic the cow, and they also utilize that with a tube bugle in as well to try to sound like a male and a female call, and you can sound like multiple elk at one time. So if you can run a turkey diaphragm, most likely you can run an elk diaphragm. It's just all in technique, where you're pushing the air and how you want to mimic the sound. Is what that's what a cow elk will do, and then you'll put a little voice reflection into it. When say you want to growl at a bugle, it'll be more like and just push more and more air so you get a higher pitch.
Yeah.
So it's really a practice. You got to practice with it, and then the only thing that'll teach you about when to use them is being in the woods.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I want to go back to whitetails a second.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I used to be that guy who would rattle and blind call and grunt and snort always like all the time. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. And I found that overcalling was an issue for me. Deer would come downwind. I'd either get busted, or the deer that I was hunting would come downwind and then obviously scent check the area, not feel comfortable, and take off. When it comes to like game calls, how do you, and we can use whitetails as an example, how do you talk to people? You said you've put on seminars before. How do you talk to people about when and how to call based off of things like body language, or if a deer is alert versus a deer is relaxed, like all of those types of scenarios?
Okay. Yeah. So we'll go through the 3 different phases of the season and just how, like I said, this is my personal opinion. This is kind of what works for me. And we'll start early season. Early season, the deer are still friends. The bucks are still buddies in a lot of cases. Because if you're in a chance to hunt a velvet state where they're still in velvet, they're all still friendly and buddies. They're bachelor'd up in a lot of cases. There's a lot more foliage on the trees, and so early season, and then all the way to the first part when their food sources are starting to change and they're going towards fallen acorns, if those are where the beans are turning yellow and they're just going to a green source or whatever. So in this case, I use a doe bleed a lot in association with a short grunt. The reason for that is because you still have a lot of immature deer, fawns that are just coming out of spots, and they're always vocalizing with their mother. And they're so in a lot of cases too, you'll see other deer communicate. The fawns, you'll see them running around the field, all the other deer in the field, just playing. So I like to mimic that a lot early season, because those deer haven't experienced the season yet, or a lot of, they're humans being in the woods.
Yeah.
So in a lot of cases, those fawns will go around bleating a little bit and all that. And so if I see a deer and I don't know what it is, I'll usually give a little fawn bleat this time of year. It's to not necessarily because this is a deer that I want to harvest. It's because I don't know what deer it is.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, if you see that one set, that could be the deer you're after. And like I said earlier, if you watch him walk by, you're always going to wonder if it was.
Yeah.
So it's better to know, okay, yeah, that's him. That way it'll let you know what you need to do next. That's one way that I use, like say the doe bleat or fawn bleat in early season in association with the short grunts, just not super loud, and just to get their attention.
Right.
Now you get up a little bit later in the year where it's, their bucks are laying scrapes. Now they're a different animal. Their hormones are different. Now they're territorial. I want to clean this area. I want the does on this area whenever they come into heat. These are my deer. So now they're going to be more aggressive. And as far as setup, and so you're talking about deer trying to blind calling and circling your wind. I have sets that I have hung that for this time of year, not because they're in the most premium spot. It's because they're like 30 to 50 yards off that premium spot, because I want to utilize the call to bring the deer to them, and usually I set those up where I can have a predominant wind, and I'll only go and hunt those stands those times. The reason why is because if I do blind call, the deer's not going to get in a position to where they can win me.
Yeah.
They're going to be able to come around the front of me. So I'm not sitting on the X. I'm bringing the deer to me, if that makes sense. Because most of the time the X is where the deer want to be, so they can go to either side of you.
Yeah.
But if you move it off and because if a deer comes to you there, most likely he's going to be an aggressive deer, and he's going to finish. He's going to commit.
Yeah. And
now the last one is, and that's usually during that phase, I'll grunt, rattle, and everything to get their attention and try to challenge them. Now the next phase could be 2 weeks after what we just talked about, and that's when the deer are really seeking and phase, cruising, and you want to get their attention. And you talked about them getting downwind and or standing there staring at you. One tip that I've talked about in my seminars for years is being able to associate, capture another sense. I know a lot of your listeners and yourself as well have grunted at deer. They've stood out there at 60 yards just staring your direction. The chest match. That's the chest match. That it's like, okay, I can't move. The deer's looking at me. I can't move. He's looking. I know he heard me. And then, finally he puts his head down. So you got to grunt again. A lot of times what I do is I carry a Ziploc bag. This sounds total redneck. I get it. People can, but it's a technique that I've used, and it's worked a lot. And the leaves are starting to fall now, so I fill up just a little quart-sized Ziploc bag full of leaves. And whenever I get in that chest match with a deer, where they're standing there looking, I have that bag of leaves with me, and I can squeeze that bag of leaves behind me so they can't see, like right up against me in the tree, for instance, to sound like there's something there. You're capturing another sense. And a lot of times that deer will commit and work its way closer, go from that 60 yard to 30 yards, and possibly present a shot opportunity, and it has several times for me.
Yeah.
It's just, like I said, really about, it's using your call in conjunction with knowing how to read that animal as well, because you have to get their attention. If they can't hear you, they're not going to come. So you got to make sure they can hear you. And then last is late season. That's when you're going to go right back, and you're going to go back to reverting to, I'm not going to call super aggressive. I'm going to get more soft and more social, because the deer are starting to yard back up and herd back up, because they're trying to replenish themselves from the rut, and they're worried about the three things that a deer needs to survive, and that's food, cover, and water.
Yeah.
So, yep.
That's all awesome information, by the way. Especially the X, right? I don't like, and that's an advanced move. If we're going to sit here and talk strategy a second, I always try to stay off the X no matter what. And like my shooting lane is in the center of an X, but not me, right? There's always got to be some kind of an escape for the wind, especially for whitetail hunting. And, you know, and that's where, going back to the original grunt call that I had, and you hit them with that burp.
Yep.
I don't know. It's just something about that I get geeked out on, and I don't.
Oh,
I don't
for
know.
sure.
I love it. I love it. So when it comes to, I want to pop into. I don't do a lot of this, but I want to pop into predator hunting for a while, because I don't know much about it, but I do know that the guys who are predator hunters are very serious about their calls, how they operate, like the realness of a call, because, you know, coyote, they don't call them wily coyotes for nothing. They're intelligent canines who will back off if they feel there's a problem there, right? So what is it, first off, what is it about predator hunting that these guys have to have the most realistic sounding calls?
Well, there's a couple things. Predator hunting is one of the fastest growing areas of hunting. And because number one, the predator count is up tremendously. And so therefore there's more and more of them. But they are very particular. Coyotes are very keen to what's their surroundings and what they're hearing. So, you know, I'm sure a lot of predator hunters out there use electronic calls, and that's great. But with that being said, people are creatures of habit. We're all creatures of habit. So therefore, when we go out to a piece of property that's loaded up with coyotes, and you put that electronic call out, what people tend to do is hit the same sounds. So they may have a hunt where they're really successful, shoot 2 or 3 coyotes, and they're hitting these sounds. And then they go out there again with the expectations, and then they are creatures of habit. They hit the same sounds again.
Yeah.
Where our calls really step into play here is utilize those electronic calls, and you can hit those sounds, but blow your handheld calls alongside it, because you can't mimic the handheld call. So therefore, you're always going to have something different. So even some of the keenest coyotes, you may not get them to commit to 20 yards the 4th or 5th time out, but you may be able to get them to where they're out there at 100 and they present a shot still, because you're spiking their curiosity even more.
Yeah.
So if there's one thing that I could say is, don't get complacent in just a electronic call, because like I said, we are creatures of habit, whether we know it or not. We are. When you climb up in a tree, everybody kind of has a routine. Okay, I'm going to hang my backpack up here. I'm going to hang my bow up here. I want my arrow quiver right here. You know what I mean? It's just the nature of the beast. We're all human, and it's no different when we apply these calls. So really, Dual has the dual chamber technology. They're super easy predator calls to blow, and they're great in conjunction with that electronic call that you use.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Now, as far as the construction, the material, all the same? Is it across all the calls, you know, all the categories that you have, from predator to elk to whitetail? Materials are all the same, or is there something special about a predator call that you have to add a separate, add a separate reed or a separate process or something different to get it to sound realistic?
No, it's all about airflow.
Okay.
It's all about airflow, the way that you push the air. You know, it's another one where you need to, especially if you're trying to use a howler of sort, you just got to learn how to push the air through the call and make the sound that you want. Distress calls, we have a closed reed system for the distress calls, which is super easy. Anybody, any beginner, anybody can use those calls, and they're highly effective.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right, so the last thing I have to ask you here, Larry, is if there's a guy out there, whether he's a predator hunter, an elk hunter, or a whitetail hunter, and he's looking to pick up some calls before the season starts, why should they consider a dual game call?
We kind of went over it. Dual it's one of the most realistic sounding calls out there, it's because of the two chambers, you being able to push the air through there and the air splitting, just like any animal, any living creature that has vocalization has it.
Right.
And Dual mimics that very thing. And so whether it's a stretch grunt call, the double back grunt call, all the way to the Warriors call which is an open reed howler coyote call, they all have that, and you will see the animals respond to it, and it's just a matter of getting one and using it. I mean, there's a lot of great call companies out there. There's a lot of animals that's been taken with just a single channel call, no two channel. But the question that you got to ask yourself is, if I would have had a two channel, would things have been different on some of those hunts that maybe weren't successful?
Yeah.
Did I actually sound like that animal? Well, I can assure you that Dual's probably going to be it's one of the most effective systems out there, especially once you practice and learn how to mimic those sounds. And I'm always open to free to answer any questions. So if any of your listeners, they can message me on Instagram, Facebook, whatever, or get with you on it as well, and you can get with me, and I'd be more than happy to help out however I can.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm sure the listeners would appreciate that. Hey, Larry, man, I really appreciate you taking time out of your very busy day to hop on and chat with us about Dual. If people want to find out more about Dual game calls, where should we send them?
You can go to dualgamecalls.com. They do have a Facebook and Instagram page too, Dual Game Calls as well. But yeah, send us a question. We'd love to answer. We'd love to help out any way we can. And give us a try. I mean, we're really confident in the calls we produce, and that and passionate not only about every call that leaves the building.
Sounds good, Larry. Good luck this upcoming season.
All right, thank you. You too.